This story was sent to us by one of our listeners. We'll use the name Ryan for him, who worked the night shift at the dispatch center in Arizona's Coconino National Forest. During the night shift, sometimes things happen that are hard to believe. It was a December night and it was snowing outside. Ryan was alone in the center, far away from the city in this small dispatch station. The silence of the night was so deep that even the sound of your own breath could feel frightening. At exactly 2:19 a.m., a red alert blinked on his console. An incoming call. Ryan looked at the clock. A call at this hour was unusual. The call was coming from a deserted location, an old Forest Service watchtower about 40 miles away from Flagstaff. The tower had been shut down for years. Its electricity had been cut as well. Ryan assumed maybe a trekker was stuck somewhere in an emergency. He took a deep breath and answered the call. 911, what is your emergency? There was only harsh static on the line. The static was so loud that his ears began to hurt. No voice, no cry for help, nothing. Ryan was about to disconnect when he suddenly felt something inside the headphones. Beneath the roar of static, there was a faint echo, like someone speaking from far away, inside a huge, empty room. Ryan slowly pushed his chair back. He pressed the headphones tightly to his ears, trying to calm his heartbeat. He thought he heard someone breathe, then a faint cough, and then a voice, an old man's whisper, so soft it almost vanished inside the static. Don't. Look outside. And then the call cut off. A sharp, piercing tone filled the line, and then silence. Ryan's body was drenched in sweat, even though it was freezing outside. He immediately woke up the chief dispatcher. According to protocol, even a Code 7 call from a deserted location required sending a unit. No ranger was available that night. By the chief's order, Ryan himself had to take an old sheriff's van to the watchtower. On the 40-mile dark, narrow road, he realized how foolish this decision was. It was already 3:30 a.m., and the forests of Coconino were so dense that even moonlight couldn't reach through. With every passing minute, his fear grew. What exactly was he going to find at that tower? By 4 a.m., Ryan reached the base of the abandoned tower. The snowfall had stopped, but the cold around the Grand Canyon's edge was bone-freezing. The tower's silhouette in the darkness looked like a giant metal skeleton. There was no vehicle, no sign of any human presence. Only a few animal tracks circling the tower's staircase in a strange pattern. Ryan pointed the van's headlights upward. The tower was at least 100 feet tall. He switched on his flashlight and slowly began to climb. The steel stairs screeched with every step. He paused every few minutes, steadying his breath, glancing down into the pitch-black void below. His flashlight reached nowhere beyond the stairs. It felt like climbing into the night sky itself. 10 minutes later, he reached the top. He drew his pistol. The small cabin was empty, filled with dust and old equipment. Ryan exhaled in relief, assuming it had been some radio interference, but then his flashlight landed on a broken, decades-old ham radio lying in the corner. Its power switch flipped to on. He touched the machine with his gloved hand. It was icy cold, colder than anything in that room, despite the heater in his van earlier. Suddenly, the radio whispered again. Ryan leaned in. The voice was soft, almost like the machine was speaking on its own. "Find me." He gripped his pistol with both hands. And then, another sound. But this one wasn't coming from the radio. It came from the roof above him. A heavy, wet dragging sound, like something enormous was being pulled across the metal. The sound circled the tower. The roof's tin sheets rattled as if struck by a massive hammer. Ryan remembered the words he heard on the call. "Don't look outside." He slowly crouched behind the thick wooden pillar in the center of the cabin. The dragging suddenly stopped. Complete silence. Silence so deep he could hear the blood rushing in his ears. Something was above him. Something that had stopped directly over his head. Listening, sensing, like a predator sniffing out its prey. Then, from a small window behind him, came the soft, horrifying sound of nails scraping on glass. Ryan turned. In that tiny pane of glass, despite the darkness, he saw an eye. Not a human eye. A huge, pitch-black, lidless eye. An eye far too big for the size of the window. It was staring at where Ryan should have been. Then a scream burst from outside. A scream not meant for human ears, like metal being cut by sand. And through that monstrous scream, the whisper he'd heard at the dispatch desk returned. Clear, loud, echoing inside his skull. "Ryan, you're here." Ryan dropped his gun. He didn't run down the stairs. He fell, sliding and crashing all the way down. Rusted steel tore his arms and legs, but he felt nothing. The moment he reached the ground, he jumped into the van, turned it on, and sped away without looking back. Not once. Ryan quit his job. He still doesn't know who called him that night, or who repeated his words from the top of that abandoned tower. Maybe that thing had been trapped in the tower for years, and Ryan had given it a door to escape. In the silence of the night, deep in the forests of Arizona, answering an emergency call can be dangerous, because you never know who is really on the other end of the line. This story was sent to me by a friend, and he says that what he saw that night changed his life forever. This is the story of a truck driver, Ethan Keller, who went on a highway in North Dakota where darkness wasn't just darkness. There was something else. The story begins at 12:30 a.m. on North Dakota's Highway 85. The air was cold, and the road was completely deserted. Ethan Keller, a 38-year-old experienced truck driver, was driving alone in his Freightliner Cascadia. His trailer was loaded with dry goods that needed to reach Williston by morning. Time was short, so he took a shortcut, Black Hollow Road, a road whose name alone makes the locals go silent. The road was surrounded by thick forest, where the darkness was so deep that even high beams could barely reveal the next turn ahead. There was no car, no light, no sound around Ethan, only the truck's engine and the whistling wind. After some time, Ethan felt as if someone was watching him from the back seat area. He checked the rearview mirror. The reflection was there, but he could see no one. He convinced himself, just fatigue, nothing else. It was around 1 a.m. when the truck's radio suddenly turned on by itself. Not a song, but a faint, painful sound of a woman crying. Ethan's heart started pounding. He immediately turned the radio off. 2 seconds later, the radio turned on again, and the crying now sounded louder and much closer. Ethan's hands began to tremble. A little further ahead, he saw a woman standing in the middle of the road, wearing a white nightgown, head bowed down, arms hanging straight at her sides. Ethan slammed the brakes, and the truck screeched to a stop. But the woman didn't move at all. Ethan honked, but there was no reaction. And then Ethan saw something that froze his blood. She wasn't standing on the ground. She was floating 3 to 4 inches above it. Ethan stopped breathing for a moment. The truck's headlights began flickering, and the engine suddenly shut off. The darkness grew even deeper. The silence was so heavy, it felt like even the air had stopped moving. The woman slowly began approaching the truck. Ethan tried the ignition. Dead, dead, dead. Nothing happened. The woman stood directly in front of the truck and slowly raised her face. Her face wasn't human. Black, hollow eyes, a strangely torn mouth, and dried blood forming a pattern across her face. Ethan was about to scream when the woman suddenly vanished like smoke in the air. The truck cabin fell silent again. Ethan's heartbeat echoed inside the cabin. Suddenly, a whisper came from behind him. "Ethan." Ethan didn't turn. He gathered the courage to look through the rearview mirror. Nothing. The whisper came again, and again, and again, as if someone was sitting right behind him. Panicking, Ethan opened the door and jumped out of the truck. Outside, the fear was different. The darkness of the North Dakota forest, the strong gusts of wind, the sound of branches snapping, and something moving rapidly around him. Ethan looked back at the road, the same woman, standing far away. But this time, she wasn't moving slowly. She was rushing toward him at an unnatural speed, not human speed, but the speed of the wind. Ethan climbed back into the truck at lightning speed. And shockingly, the engine started on its own. The RPM needle swung to the maximum, and the headlights blasted to full brightness. Ethan slammed the accelerator. He checked the rearview mirror. The road looked empty. But then, heavy thuds hit the truck's roof. Thack, thack, thack. Ethan tried to look up, and his heart froze. The same woman, clinging to the roof of the truck, her head twisted upside down, and her eyes staring directly into Ethan's cabin. Ethan pushed the speed higher. The truck raced at 70, 80, 90 miles per hour. Dark silhouettes moved along the road, some headless, some half-bodied, like they all wanted to collide with the truck. Ethan didn't brake. He kept driving straight through. The truck shook violently, as if slicing through something. Suddenly, the road ended. Ahead was a deep ravine. Ethan slammed the brakes with all his strength. The truck screeched and came to a stop, just a few feet before the edge. Ethan stepped out of the cabin. The woman was gone. The sounds were gone. The wind was normal. The forest was calm. Slowly, dawn arrived. Sunlight filtered through the trees onto the road. Ethan sat down by the roadside. Tears filled his eyes. The road behind him looked completely normal, as if nothing had happened. But one thing remained in Ethan's heart forever. Where darkness stays for too long, something else stays with it. After that night, Ethan never drove at night again. He sold his truck, and the moment he heard the name Black Hollow Road, he would tremble. But locals still say that every night at 2 a.m., near the old bend of Black Hollow Road, a woman in a white gown appears, head down, and any vehicle that passes by her is never the same again. And yes, if you have ever had a scary journey or experienced a frightening event, you can share it with us. If you also wish to share something with us, type your story in the comment box and send it to us. Thank you for watching the video.